Good afternoon and welcome to the January 26, 2021 Chatham Select Board meeting. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify me. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 134208-476#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. So it's important that we are able to conduct this meeting to the best of our ability. So before we start the meeting, I'm asking you to please mute your audio and disable your video until the time to present or comment. We'll begin the meeting by taking a roll call of the Board of Selectmen in order to declare a quorum, okay? And that should have said Select Board. I messed up on that one, sorry. So Member Kokolas, he's not present yet. Member Metters.
Present.
Member Nicastro.
Present.
Member Dykens.
Present.
Okay, so, and the chair is present. So we do have a quorum. So tonight, moving forward, we have approval of the meeting minutes for January 19th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve those meeting minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. Does anybody have any edits or comments? Any changes? I don't see.
No.
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yep. Yeah, just two real nits on page 3, second paragraph down. The last line in the sentence should be to, not toe. It's just a spelling. It's just a typo.
Okay.
And then on same thing on page 6, third paragraph down. He said there are protections for smaller towns. This town needs an S. That's it. That's it.
Okay. Any other changes? Nothing? All right. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Yeah, I already moved it.
Oh, you did. I'm sorry. All right. We'll vote a roll. Member Dykens.
Yeah, aye.
Member Nicastro. Dean, I think you need to unmute your phone. Member Metters.
Aye.
Selectman, I say aye. Dean, are you there? Okay, we have a 3-0, and we have 2 not present right now. But that's a quorum to be able to accept the meeting minutes. And could somebody text Peter to see how he's doing, logging on, and what's happening with Dean, if you don't mind? And I'll just go over a little bit about tonight's meeting while you're doing that. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so we have public announcements and agenda item requests next, and this is where you can make a general non-deliberative community announcement or request an item to be considered for an upcoming meeting. So I'm just going to look to the board. Does anybody have an agenda item request or an announcement to make? Corey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I noticed the chair of the Independence Day Parade Committee is on tonight, and we'll be making an announcement hopefully shortly. But I do want to make a little plug. Recruiting is a little bit hard in these winter months, but the parade committee does have 2 openings. We don't know what the format of the parade may be for this coming year. But if you would like to participate, there's 2 openings, and if the help would be greatly appreciated by the other members who are currently serving. There's a lot of brainstorming going on right now, and we would appreciate the help. So if you're interested in serving, please contact the town website for the talent bank, and we would be glad to do an interview as soon as possible. So,
Okay, great. All right, great. Any others? Any from the board before we put it out to the public? Okay, any remote participants, please use the Teams app hand to raise your hand, or if you're on a phone, please speak out and I will make a list. Any public announcements from the remote participants? I see one, Justin Bohannon. Go ahead.
See Peter.
And Peter, okay.
I know, I see Peter and Dean now.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, and I
Okay.
apologize.
No worries.
Um,
Justin, we're doing agenda item requests and public announcements, and right now we have Justin Bohannon. He's the chairman of the 4th of July committee. Go ahead, Justin.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, as Mr. Metters just noted, we've met a couple times, and we're trying to plan something for this summer. We're looking forward to this year's event, and while we don't know whether it'll be our traditional in-person parade or another virtual event, we're looking forward to putting something together. And with that in mind, I'm here tonight to ask the community for themes, as we always do. And what we're looking for this year is a theme that would work well as either an in-person event or a virtual event like we did last year. So the suggestion form is on our website, which is www.chathamparade.com. All suggestions must be submitted by February 15th. Right now, there's two ways to do so. Either by our preferred way is just to visit the website. There's an electronic form that you can fill out and submit right on the website. Or there's a form that you can download and email to us. If neither of those ways work for you, you can just email us and we'll figure out a way for you to be able to submit a form. Other ways that we've done in the past don't really work right now. So, but we'll figure something out so that everyone who wants to submit something can. We'll announce the theme in March, allowing for people to prepare their entries. If a virtual event is necessary, we're looking to kind of expand what we did last year with our virtual parade. Last year we had a little time to put something together, and we're looking to kind of expand on that this year so that people can really put a lot of effort into their entries just like they would for an in-person event. So we're really looking forward to hearing from everybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure we'll get an update in March from you again.
Yes,
And thank you for all your hard work. Okay,
You're welcome.
let's hope that we can get a parade.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, are there any other remote participants that would like to make an agenda item request or a public announcement? I see Carolyn. Carolyn? I'm assuming that's Carolyn McClellan, is it?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to request, our committee would like to request that item be placed on the Board of Selectmen agenda pertaining to discussing designating Middle Road as a parcel of land to be developed for capital A or attainable housing and/or. So we'd like to discuss that prior to when you have to decide what's going to go on the warrant.
Okay, great. I just want to let everybody know that Carolyn is the chairman of the Community Housing Partnership, formerly the Affordable Housing Committee.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
So thank you. That's okay, Carolyn. Thank you very much. Anybody else, remote participants, have an agenda item request or public announcement? All right, seeing none. Just want to give a little overview of tonight's meeting for those here. Let's see. I think that basically we have, we've gone through our public announcements and whatever, and now we're moving on to new business. But before we do when we start new business, we're going to have a coronavirus COVID-19 update from Dr. Duncanson and our town manager, Jill Goldsmith. It's says in our agenda item that a finance director will be giving an update, but she gave that to us last week. After that, we will have public comments where you may speak on any matter in our business agenda. And as a reminder, there is a 5-minute comment period per speaker. The items we're going to be discussing and maybe doing action on tonight are renewal of fishware licenses, capital project updates, which will be wastewater and sewer project update, draft wastewater 2021 article, ATM article and ballot question, and the draft stormwater drainage proposed 2021 ATM article and ballot question. And then we will have another fiscal year 2022 operating capital budget review. Then the board will go into discussion of those items and take our noted actions. And then lastly, there's another opportunity for the public to comment on our business agenda items. And then we'll have final comments from the board. We'll do a motion to adjourn. And as usual, I'm trying to keep our meeting to 2 hours. And I say that with a smile on my face. So first order of business is the coronavirus update from the Director of Natural Resources, Dr. Duncanson. Dr. Bob?
Yes, thank you, Shireen, and good evening. So just quickly, today's update, well, it's not going to be quick because there's a lot of information to pass today. But as of yesterday afternoon, there were 503,000 cases of COVID-19 in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and there were a little over 14,100 deaths in the Commonwealth. On the Cape, we are currently over 8,303 cases, and we've had we've had 59 new cases since yesterday's report came out. And we are currently at 322 deaths on Cape Cod, which was only up slightly from the previous day. Actually, there was 1 new case since the previous day. In Chatham, we are currently at 193 cases. And in total, we have 16 deaths in Chatham. However, as I've reported earlier, 12 of those deaths occurred at Liberty Commons. So they may or may not have impacted Chatham residents, if you will, because obviously there are people at Liberty Commons who are not necessarily Chatham residents originally. So a total of 16 deaths, 12 at Liberty Commons. There's 4 Chatham residents that we know of specifically who have died since January of 2020. And most of those cases occurred in the first surge into spring. And then most of them have occurred in the most recent month of January of this year. Just to give you some perspective graphically where we are currently at, if you let me share my screen here. So right now I am showing, hopefully everybody can see it, but the monthly total of cases in Chatham, both total cases as well as resolved cases, meaning for the most part that individuals have passed the 10-day isolation period from a positive COVID-19 test or the onset of their symptoms. And as you can see, as we've talked about before, things were going along pretty well in Chatham till we hit December of last year and that post-Thanksgiving surge. And that surge has continued into January of this year with the post-Thanksgiving, post-Christmas, post-New Year's surge. And as you can see, we have had more confirmed cases in January so far of this year than we had in any month last year. And the huge increase, or not increase, but the huge showing of resolved cases in January of this year reflects the high number of cases in December, many of which came later in the month, and so they actually are counted as a resolved case in January because it went into the second month for their 10-day quarantine period. And then just to show you also the other figure that we generally show, which is the age distribution. Here is the age distribution of the 193 Chatham cases to date. And you may recall that earlier in the year, the highest demographic that we had was really the 20 to 49-year-olds, those three age demographics. But recently we have seen a substantial spike in the number of deaths or the number of cases in the 80-plus-year-old. And unfortunately, that has also transpired over into our deaths. And that's a reflection of the high number of cases, primarily that we've experienced at Liberty Commons. Of the total 80 cases in January of this year so far, almost 50 of those cases are related to Liberty Commons. And you know, as I've said before, I think I know we still need to give Liberty Commons a huge pat on the back because they have been doing a phenomenal job through the first 8 or 9 months of this pandemic, you know, keeping cases out of Liberty Commons and away from the most susceptible population. And what's happened recently just really reflects how insidious this virus is, that even an organization that has been doing an absolutely phenomenal job with PPE and closing down and preventing people from, you know, from visiting their relatives in their facility, you know, the virus still finds ways to get in. And it's unfortunate, but, you know, it's just something we've all had to deal with. And, you know, a number of other nursing homes or assisted living facilities on the Cape experienced this phenomenon early on in the process. Liberty Commons did a great job and is still doing a great job keeping it at bay. But they are now having to deal with the fact that they've experienced this spike in cases among their residents, in spite of all the efforts that they have been making and continue to make. And just to give you an idea of how this has transpired really over the last 6 to 7 weeks, for the first week in December, we only had a total of 6 cases. And there was 1 case at Liberty Commons. At the end of December and the beginning of January, we were up to 13 cases, and 61% of those cases were attributable to Liberty Commons. In the first full week in January, we peaked at 36 cases, and 72% of those cases were attributable to Liberty Commons. And then since then, we've seen a steady decline to where for the past week, we have had a total of 13 cases, and 46% of those cases were attributable to Liberty Commons. So while there is definitely community spread, you know, the unfortunate influence of this virus in Liberty Commons has really skewed some of our numbers. And then just a couple other things that I wanted to touch base on. I know that there is still interest in the community regarding the North Chatham Post Office. I reached out to the Visiting Nurse Association earlier today to speak with them about whether or not they are aware of any other cases that are tied specifically to Liberty Commons, to the North Chatham Post Office. They have added 1 case to that cluster. It is an employee. It is not a Chatham resident. As you know, from the beginning, we indicated there were 2 Chatham residents that were impacted by that who were employees at the post office. There are no other known cases among the general population that anyone is aware of that we could specifically tie to the North Chatham Post Office. So I just wanted to put that out there for the general population to be aware of. And then on to vaccine. Vaccine, as we know, is the major hot topic right now, both on the Cape, within the state, and across the nation. As yesterday, the governor announced that there was going to be a shift in the priority groupings for phase 2, and we put that information up on our website as soon as that announcement was made. Actually, it was put on the website even while the governor was still speaking on other issues. But the major change there was that individuals 75 years of age and older were moved to the head or the top priority in phase 2. And individuals 65 years and older and individuals with 2 comorbidities were moved up to the second priority group in phase 2. The governor also announced yesterday that phase 2 was basically going to start on February 1st, and that individuals 75 years and older would be able to start making reservations or appointments for vaccination under phase 2 starting tomorrow. While that is absolutely great news, unfortunately, it does not necessarily reflect reality in either the Commonwealth or on Cape Cod. Because on our DPH call this afternoon, and then we also had a call among the health agents and the county on the Cape this afternoon, I can tell you that on the county call with the health agents, there is an extreme amount of frustration in all the towns on the Cape and the islands regarding those announcements, primarily because of the fact that there is still an extreme difficulty in getting vaccine. And just to give you an example, and this came out during our DPH call today, although Massachusetts is moving into phase 2 as of February 1st, the state has still not received a sufficient volume of vaccine to meet all the demand from phase 1. So for all the first responders, the folks in the congregate living facilities and others in phase 1, we still have not received enough vaccine to cover all that need. But we are effective Monday now moving into phase 2. There are still severe limitations on the vaccine pipeline. The state indicated today that some organizations or groups, meaning, municipalities or regional cooperatives, if you will, that have requested vaccine will only get a fraction of their requests for the next several weeks. And that's just a recognition of the pipeline problems getting vaccines to the states from the federal government and what's available. You may have heard that we may, in the next couple of weeks, have a third vaccine. Johnson & Johnson expects to release information on the efficacy of their vaccine next week. And that would be kind of the first step in terms of moving ahead to request emergency use authorization from CDC and FDA. The big advantage to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, if that does receive an emergency use authorization, is it is only a single dose vaccine. So unlike Pfizer and Moderna, which requires 2 doses to get to that, 90 plus efficacy, hopefully the 1 dose from Johnson & Johnson will provide a similar level of protection. And if that does occur, that would be good news. And Johnson & Johnson did indicate this afternoon that they are ramping everything up and will be able to meet all their already spoken for vaccine allocations, if you will. So that would be good news. If that does come, it will still be probably several weeks or a month or so before we may start to see the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in Massachusetts. So, in terms of the vaccinations for the phase 2 groupings, the state has indicated that appointments are going to open up starting tomorrow. And I urge everyone to continue to go to the town's website. We updated our website with that information as well as the groupings yesterday, as I said, during the governor's press conference. But don't be surprised when, if you go onto the state's vaccine map and where they do the appointments, that you don't see availability. Unfortunately, that is becoming a major issue. And, it just reflects the fact that supply is not keeping up with demand. And so we have been talking with the county. We will probably be issuing a press release later this afternoon. The county is probably going to release one tonight to just help to manage people's expectations. As I said a couple of weeks ago during this call, it would be great that if instantaneously we had enough vaccine for everybody that wants it, but that clearly is not going to be the case. There is not going to be enough vaccine getting in the pipeline and getting out to where it needs to get to manage expectations in the short term. Similarly, there is no pre-registration list. Neither the town of Chatham or Barnstable County or the state is maintaining a list where you can, quote, sign up, and then, get notified when vaccine is available. We are doing our best in terms of getting information out. The state is doing their best. More vaccination locations are coming. The county is currently looking at setting up 5 locations around the Cape. They're looking at utilizing the Falmouth site at the fairgrounds. It's currently being used for testing. The Melody Tent site, Cape Cod Community College potentially, the Barnstable County Complex potentially, and the county is in discussions with the Cape Cod National Seashore and the towns in that region of the Cape about setting up a site towards that area. None of those sites have been finalized yet. Similarly, the state is also looking at a site for a state-sponsored mass vaccination location, similar to what they're doing at Gillette Stadium, at Fenway Park, out towards Worcester and other locations. They are looking at a site in Hyannis potentially. The state has indicated, given the time of the year, they would prefer an indoor site. Some of the sites that we're looking at with the county would be outdoors, or, one of the sites that's been used very successfully the last couple of weeks for the first responder vaccinations is in the New Orleans DPW building. But the state is looking at an indoor site in the Hyannis area, but nothing has been released publicly yet. And by that, basically nothing has been finalized yet. So there's really no information that we can give out to the public in terms of specific sites, locations, days, signups or anything. So as soon as we get that information, we will get that out through press releases, by posting to the website on Channel 18. We'll make that available to the public just as quick as we can get confirmed information. But unfortunately, at this point, there really is no confirmed information to get out to folks.
Again, I went on the Barnstable website, also went to the map to check. Let me, just so we're clear, if somebody was going to sign up tomorrow, because the notice came out that you could, like you mentioned, sign up tomorrow if you're over 75, and you go on the map, and let's say actually it has I assume they're going to tell you which ones are going to be available for phase 2 or not, sort of ahead of time. But can you, just to be clear, can you sign up and get the paperwork in, and then have to go back and try and get a location, or does it have to be all done at one time? In other words, if there's nothing available tomorrow, then you have to just come back and do everything all at once, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things that basically you just have to keep checking the website and checking the website, just like you were, the analogy that's been used is people trying to get concert tickets. They become available at 10 o'clock in the morning and you just have to keep checking back till you can get in. Yeah, unfortunately, that's the way the system is currently set up and is working. Yeah, the state is talking about making improvements, but until we actually see some improvements, I wouldn't put any stock in anything changing in the short term.
Okay. Yeah, basically what you're saying is it doesn't sound like we know which sites we're going to have for phase 2, and we're not going to know it in the next 6 hours, potentially, or 11 hours, or whatever it has. But it's worthwhile just keep on going on the site, and you can sign up for alerts, which is what I've done. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the biggest difficulty is you may see sites listed, but the question is whether or not they have vaccine available. And that really is driven by the fact that there's a limited amount of vaccine going out. I mean, to give you an example, Barnstable County had 500 doses for phase 1 participants. They split 250 for today and 250 for Thursday. That press release went out late last Friday. By early Saturday morning, they were sending us an email saying those slots were already full. And so, when we're getting such small amounts of vaccine at a time, the state was indicating earlier today that, it may be on the order of like 100 doses a week. It's very difficult to plan a large mass vaccination, program when you may only get 100 doses a week. And until the supply chain, kind of catches up and loosens up a bit, that's what we're going to be faced with, unfortunately.
Yeah. And we're not alone. If you just watch the news, you can see many other states have the same problem. Most do, like.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Shireen, you're muted.
Shireen, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, Dean. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Dean, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Bob, thanks for the report. I just had a question about the vaccines and what the state officials are saying about the availability of dose. So if you go and get the first dose of the Pfizer or the Moderna, is there some assurance that the person can get the second dose within the time period during which they're supposed to get it? And also, how do they know that, or are there plans in place to make sure that if you took the Moderna vaccine as the first dose, that when you go in for the second, you're going to get this Moderna for the second and not the Pfizer, or vice versa?
Yeah, the states provided some guidance on that. The guidance is basically wherever you make your first appointment, you should make your second appointment at the same location, because they are taking into account the need for the second dose. And so the state is saying, all right, if we used 100 doses at site X, in 21 days or 28 days, depending on which vaccine it was, we're going to ship 100 second doses to the same site. So, if you go to site X for your first dose, you should go back to site X for your second dose. So they are trying to track that. It's extremely complicated. It's difficult, but the state is trying to take that into effect and account for that when they send out the doses. But the important thing is to sign up at the same location you signed up for the first dose.
And with respect to the Johnson & Johnson, are they saying anything about what if a person prefers to take the Johnson & Johnson? Are we going to know about what the manufacturer is when we go into we try to sign up?
Yes, in general, when you sign up, it indicates which vaccine they have available. There's been no details yet on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, just because it hasn't even received emergency use authorization yet. And that's the first step at the federal level for a vaccine to be used by anybody. I expect that once that happens, we'll see more information coming out of the J&J vaccine.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to see a huge demand for the Johnson & Johnson. But that's a huge company, and I think they probably have significant distribution networks of their own. I will just say, as an observational comment, I complained about the last week about the unavailability of the vaccine for those 65 and over in terms of where they were placed on the schedule. And so it was heartening to hear, notwithstanding all the complications that you've outlined, that the 65 and plus cohort has been moved up in priority. My other comment is a negative one, not obviously on you or just on our society. I mean, as someone that was a child during the polio epidemic, when they were able to administer the vaccine to 50 million school children pretty immediately, and the vaccine was available in doctors' offices as well. It's really shameful the way this country is handling this. People seem, many of our officials seem more concerned with shutting businesses down than in getting this vaccine program in place, and that's a negative comment on our officials in Washington, present and past. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board for Dr. Duncanson? Are there any remote participants who would like to ask a question or make a comment? I see Elaine. Go ahead, Elaine.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple things. I had read 3 or 4 press news outlet reports, including Bloomberg, ranking all the states. And according to that report, we have 592,000 doses, but we've only distributed 49% of them. And they said they're actually sitting on them in Massachusetts. And we are ranked 42 out of 50 states in terms of distribution. We're only at 5.2%. So I think we need to look to Governor Baker as to why. I think if you don't use what you have, you're not going to get more. And if we're sitting on, 250,000, 300,000 doses, that's got to get distributed. The other thing that concerns me is currently, I had heard reports that Gillette Stadium, they opened it up, but they only gave 500 doses in a day. And they said Fenway was going to be able to do the same thing, 500 doses, maybe 1,000 a day. If you look at our map, it shows 3 Stop and Shops, a Walgreens, and 2 CVS's that are going to be giving the shots. I can't believe that that's the extent of which the state has decided. They're talking about bigger facilities, but those stores are, first of all, I don't know why you would give them out in a grocery store unless they're keeping them in the meat freezer. They're not going to be able to do more than 50 or 100 a day. So the infrastructure, and you've all said it, and I'm just preaching to the choir, but the infrastructure available here and the fact that we can't make an appointment and then get a call when there's an opening and we have to sit on the phone. We're talking 80-year-old people that are going to have to constantly try and get on the list. And it's just unacceptable when the very population that needs it the most is going to be put in a position where they literally have to set their alarms at 5 a.m. so they can get on the list before it gets filled up by other people. And I think you got to push back at the state and ask why they're sitting on, almost 300,000 doses. And we've got to get them out to the people. Thank you.
Are there any other remote participants that would like to make a comment or ask a question to Dr. Bob? All right, Dr. Bob, before you go, I thought it would be a fitting time as we start to talk about the coordination of the vaccinations and all that will entail for the public and the staff and the Board of Health to commend you and Health Agent Giorgio for your considerable work and commitment to the town. And I know you don't like this stuff, but I'm just going to say it. Since last March, I'm not sure, maybe 40 weeks ago, the Health Division had worked, since then you've worked incredible hours. And I know very often without any days off, coordinating with and communicating to us and the community information to keep us safe. You and Judith have availed yourself to this board and the public and responded to concerns and sought solutions, even sometimes in difficult situations, and most often in very real time. You've worked in this capacity all the while, and I want people to understand, all the while doing the regular business of your department and the town. So I just want to simply pause for a moment and recognize you and Judith and say thank you very, very much. truly appreciated.
Thank you. We're just trying to do what we can to help the community.
I know. Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're going to move on to our town manager. Jill, go right ahead. Do you have an
Okay,
update?
thank you, Madam Chair. So as you know, we've paused in-person appointments for the public until January 31st. And based on the advice of Dr. Bob and our fire chief, Dave, we decided to further postpone the in-person appointments until February 12th. So again, staff is here. We're in rotation. We're able to answer phones and emails, drop boxes, and so forth. And if there is an emergency that you need assistance with, certainly ask for that accommodation. We recently had to do one for someone, so we're there for you. So again, we're pausing the in-person appointments through February 12th, and we'll revisit that before then to give the public notice about resuming the Tuesday, Thursday appointments. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or for Jill from the board? Any from the remote participants? Okay, thank you, Jill.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to our public comment period. This is up front of our business agenda, and this is where you may comment or on any of the business agenda items that the board will be discussing later. A reminder that there's a 5-minute per speaker time frame here. So any remote participants wish to make a public comment before we get going on our business agenda? Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hands. Are there any people on the phone that would like to make a comment? All right. Okay, so we're going to move on. And the first item, business item agenda item is renewal of fish weirs licenses. And I'm going to recuse myself and turn this agenda item over to the Vice Chair, Peter Kokolis. Okay, and I will jump off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This agenda item is renewal of fish weir permits. There are 5 of them there. It was put in by Ted Kean, but I don't see him on the line. So I'll give just a quick synopsis. It's these are applications that are submitted for renewal of 5 fish pier permits located in Chatham waters. These are ongoing permits. I see that Ernie or Shannon are probably online. If you'd like to give us a little bit of a discussion on it, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, sure. This is Shannon. Can you guys hear me okay?
Shannon. Welcome.
Okay, thanks. This is just our annual, or we renew these grants every 5 years. These are the 5 that we hold in Chatham waters. We have held these permits for several decades, if not generations, I guess, at this point. And nothing is changing about the renewals, the grants. Nothing's changing about the year. Everything's the same as it always is with us. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, well, I think it's mentioned in here, but the only point I think I'd make is you're not going to be using all 5 at one time. They're just options, right?
That's correct. We don't have the bandwidth anymore to put that level of gear in the water. So if we do put one in Chatham, we would only put one this year. It looks like we're probably going to only put one in Harwich, but we always like to keep our options open in case the fish move in. So
sure. Okay, we have any questions or comments from the board? You see Corey at the top. Anything, Corey? Anyone?
No, I mean, I know Jeff has got his hands up. I don't have any questions. I'm supportive of this. We've done it for I mean, this has been going on forever. I mean, so no issues at all. I know Jeff has got his hand up, but
yeah, I see it now. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I just wanted to comment that after what follows after we approve, it goes up to the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries and then to the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, for their approval as well. This is probably the second, if not the third time that I've seen these applications, and I'm certainly in favor of their approval, and I will move that the Board of Selectmen approve the applications as submitted.
Okay, I got a second.
Second.
Second by Dean.
Yeah.
Any more comments? Okay, let's take a vote. Corey?
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. And I'll just make a comment about, I remember first coming to Chatham and looking out of Harding's Beach and seeing those sticks sticking up there, wondering what that was. And in an event, somebody told me that's a living history of thousands of years of fishing in Chatham. And I think I appreciate that. So thank you very much, Shannon.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next business item, and that's capital projects update. And one of our first is the wastewater sewer project update 2011 to the current to present. So I think this is again Dr. Duncanson. Dr. Duncanson.
Yeah, good afternoon again. Thanks, Shireen.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asked to give the board a hopefully relatively quick update on where we stand with the comprehensive sewer management, the comprehensive wastewater management plan, before you got into discussion of potential articles for the May town meeting. So as you've seen in the memo, we finished the comprehensive wastewater management plan in 2009. It was actually started in 1995 when we hired the consultants to work on that. And a year later, the Board of Selectmen created a Citizens Advisory Committee to work along with staff and the consultant to develop the plan. Over those intervening years, there were hundreds of meetings about the plan, the majority of which were televised. Some of those meetings were some of the first televised meetings the town of Chatham held. And it culminated in the completion of the plan in 2009. The plan recommended that the town of Chatham move forward with sewering the entire community over 2 phases over a 30-year period. So phase 1 of the comprehensive wastewater management plan really targeted those watersheds. And by watersheds, we mean that land area that contributes water to a particular embayment system. And I didn't include it, but there's a lot of detail. There's a 4-volume comprehensive wastewater management plan document that's available in the library. It's been up at our website for over 10 years now. So if people want to see the specifics, they can go to that. But phase 1, which includes about 65% of the community, were those watersheds that were needed to meet TMDLs, or total maximum daily loads, for nitrogen that were produced by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and are regulatory in nature. So the town is under obligation to meet those TMDLs, or in other words, to take whatever actions are necessary to reduce nitrogen so that it's below those TMDLs in those receiving water bodies. And then the remaining roughly 1/3 of the town was in phase 2. Those are watersheds that did not necessarily have to meet a TMDL because there was none. And they're primarily in the water bodies like Chatham Harbor and Pleasant Bay that were more heavily flushed and larger in size. And so nitrogen coming in from their watersheds was not having at the time a negative impact. And we all know that since the plan was completed, there's been a second breach in Chatham Harbor. And that has improved water quality in some of those areas. But, we targeted the watersheds that needed it, and those are primarily the ones on the south side, areas like the Stage Harbor Complex, Mill Creek, Taylor's Pond, and some of the embayments on the north side, areas like Riders Cove and Crow's Pond that, aren't as well flushed. And so the plan went through and had a number of goals, the first of which was to address the nitrogen TMDLs, and also to preserve the town's drinking water quality and the quality of our freshwater ponds, because even though the plan is targeted primarily at nitrogen, when you're sewering an area, you're also protecting the groundwater and you're protecting the freshwater surface resources. is USDA funding through the Rural Development Program. We had talked to USDA about, funding it, and they told us, hey, we get $2 million for the entire state of Massachusetts. And so, we really can't bring much to the table. So at the time, we were anticipating that town manager at the time from California. We ran some quick numbers calculations, and even though had already proposed to get all that money from the SRF program at 2%, the USDA, even though it was a grant and loan, and the loan portion was at a higher interest rate than the USDA was going to be, when taken in context with the grant itself, it turned out to be a good way to go. So we ended up pulling the wastewater treatment plant from the state SRF program and using the USDA money to fund that. And so we saved the town $18 million right off the bat before we even put a shovel in the ground. And then in subsequent years, there were town meeting appropriations in 2013, 14, 17, and 2019. So that as of right now, town meeting has appropriated $130 million towards the wastewater project. And most of that is now being funded through the SRF, and the majority of it is being funded at 0% interest. Because one of the things that came along from Chatham's early involvement with the state and the Mass Estuaries project was that these were going to be big numbers, not only for Chatham, but for many other communities in the Commonwealth to try to handle. But the state recognized that it was a major problem that needed to be handled statewide. So they amended the state revolving fund program to say that if you had a nutrient-related problem and you weren't subject to an enforcement action by the Commonwealth, that 2% SRF loan could be dropped down to 0%. So basically, you're able to borrow the money with no interest. And so that was great. So all the projects that Chatham has funded through the SRF program for the wastewater plan since 2009 have been at that 0%. We were the first community in the Commonwealth to receive 0% funding. And for many years, we were the only community in the Commonwealth to receive the 0%. Just because of where we were with timing, it's now gotten a little bit more competitive. As more towns have, gone ahead and completed wastewater management plans and are in construction as well. But we're still well poised to continue receiving that 0% funding. To date, we have undertaken 10 construction contracts, and in that memo, I gave you a brief outline of what each of those projects were and their status, whether or not they've been completed. Or right now, we have 3 construction projects underway. Phase 1C, 3, and 4, as we call it, Phase 1D1, and also Phase 1E1. And all those projects, 2 of those projects will come to completion this spring, and the third, the 1E1 project, will come to completion likely in the fall or maybe late spring. We may be doing some final paving in the fall. And then we have a number of other projects that are currently in design, 1C5, 1D2, 1E2, and 1E3. It's taken some time to get some of those designed because there's pump stations involved. We generally try to site pump stations on town property or in the road right of way because it makes it much easier. But for these particular projects, we don't have town property right where we need to site the pump station. So we have to work with adjacent property owners to try to get easements on their property. So that, sometimes that takes some time. We've had some great success working with residents in town to get pump stations sited. We've had some pump station locations gifted to the town. In other cases, we've had to pay for those pump station easements. But the folks that we've dealt with have been very supportive of the overall program. And I can honestly say nobody has stiffed it to the town in trying to negotiate a good easement that works both for them and for us. And I just wanted to indicate some of the reasons how we pick the various areas that we do pick. Probably the first reason is the environmental sensitivity. As I indicated early on, we're targeting those watersheds and embayments where nitrogen has been identified as most critical. But we try to coordinate these projects whenever we can. If there's a road project coming up or a water main replacement project or stormwater improvements, we try to integrate everything together, and that way, we tend to save money by doing it. It's generally cheaper to do them at the same time as opposed to consecutively. And it's also less impactful on both the community as a whole with traffic detours and whatnot, as well as the neighbors that are immediately adjacent to these projects. And so we always take that into account. We want it to be consistent with the comprehensive wastewater management plan. And kind of the last thing that comes in that we take into account is the cost. We don't let that be the driver of whether or not we're going to do a project. And to give you an example, as you probably know, we're doing work up in the area immediately adjacent to East Harwich. Because of our agreement with Harwich that was negotiated a couple of years ago, we basically fast-tracked that area because we had to get our infrastructure in place before Harwich could do their infrastructure and then bring flow to the Chatham wastewater treatment plant with the goal of helping to protect Pleasant Bay as a whole. So we basically fast-tracked that, but we didn't do it to the detriment of other areas, say in the Oyster Pond watershed, and that's why we basically have the 3 construction contracts underway simultaneously here. And then we have a couple of other contracts or a couple of other projects that we're working on that we finished design, but the projects haven't yet gone out to bid. We have an upgrade to the Mill Pond pump station, which was one of the original pump stations from 1969, 1970. That needs an upgrade because it's old technology, and we want to increase the flow through that pump station, as we expand the system out to other areas to the east, the north, and the south. Ultimately, that flow will come through that pump station, so we need to make sure that we have sufficient capacity and the pump station is up to date. So as we've completed these wastewater projects, the Board of Health goes ahead and issues connection orders to the properties that are impacted. To date, they've issued over 450 connection orders. They have granted 82 time extensions. Connection to the new sewer system is mandatory. You cannot opt out, if you will. The only thing the Board of Health can do is to grant a time extension. And we've had folks come in and speak to the board about, they're in the process of selling the house, or residents have died and the property is in probate. They have 2 kids in college and so they just can't afford to make the connections right now. So far the board has granted 82 time extensions, as well as rescinded 40 connection orders. And that's generally for properties that are, on a corner. And so they have the option of connecting on one street or another. And connecting on one of the streets may be easier than the one where the current sewer is. So we take all those kinds of things into account. We've had some properties where they back up, they have one street in the front, they back up in their backyard to another street. And again, connecting to the other street is easier. And so the board has granted those requests as well. There's been 411 connections to date, and that has probably been updated and since I wrote the memo, which is about a 63% connection rate. We have 74 properties currently in the process of connecting, meaning they've submitted their plans. They may already have a permit in hand. They're just waiting for their contractor to schedule the work. Or other circumstances. And so when you take that into account, the connection rate is about 75%. We have instituted a new online tracking program that makes it much easier for Board of Health staff or health staff to keep a handle on exactly where individual properties are in the process, and automatically now generates reminder letters and ultimately enforcement letters. We've worked with town council and we've reviewed what some other towns have done. So basically, if you get a connection order from the Board of Health, you will now automatically get a reminder letter at 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. And then at 12 months, you will get an enforcement letter, because generally the Board of Health grants a year for you to make the connection. So if you haven't made that connection within a year, you will get the enforcement letter, which indicates there can be court action or fines of up to $200 a day for not moving forward. So we've now automated that process, which makes it much easier to track, because previous to that, it basically had to be done manually, which, you know, took an extraordinary amount of time and effort to keep track of where people were in the queue, what time frame they were working under, whether or not they'd already applied to the DPW online system or not. So that is going to be a huge, make a huge difference going forward in terms of you know, following through on the connections. So I think that's all I wanted to touch on in terms of the overall CWMP. We do have 2 articles that I can talk about either now or separately if you want to entertain questions on the CWMP overall.
Let's entertain some questions. Sorry, there's some reverb again. I don't know where it's coming from. Could everybody just mute their, and then remute? Okay. Jill?
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard it. You probably said it, Dr. Bob. So we have 645 properties that are eligible for connection.
Yes, 645 eligible to connect. 411 have connected so far. We have 74 in process. And then the others, you know, we're sending reminder letters and ultimately, you know, the enforcement letter. And there was included in your packet a figure. Hopefully you got it in color. If not, you know, it's available on the website, and I can send it around to everybody in color, which basically shows where all the sewering contracts have taken place to date, both the ones that are completed and the ones that are currently in process, you know, being designed and whatnot. So you can see we've been concentrating primarily on that area on the south side of Route 28 or along Route 28, because I think it's important for people, and I know the board knows this, but it's important for the public to understand that when you sewer, it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. You can't just arbitrarily bounce anywhere in town. You need to, you know, basically expand out from where existing infrastructure already is. So, you know, it's not something like we could suddenly run up and sewer Nickerson's Neck, because there's no intervening infrastructure between there and the wastewater treatment plant. So you have to kind of work out. So as you know, Chatham's had a sewer system since 1969, 1970 in the downtown area. The first thing we did was to expand that along Route 28 to be able to then branch out into the individual neighborhoods. And as you can see, that's basically what we've been doing since, you know, we started back in 2010.
Bob, on the connection side, oh, Jill, you went off camera, so I assumed that was the only question you had. On the connection side, have you been able to track what the average cost to the public, you know, to a residence is for connecting to the sewer? Or like a...
Yes. Sorry to cut you off, but yes,
No worries.
whenever anybody connects to the sewer, we then send them an anonymous survey and ask them for how much did they pay for engineering, how much did they pay for permitting, how much did they pay for construction, did they have any other expenses? You know, one of the things we find is people, you know, They may have repaving expenses if they had to dig up their driveway. They have re-landscaping. So we asked them for all those kinds of things. Did they incur plumbing expenses? You know, some people, in some circumstances, you know, their septic system may be in the backyard, but the sewer is in the front where the street is. It may be cheaper for them to replumb in the basement than basically, you know, trying to connect all the way around to the house where the pipe goes to the septic system. So some people incur plumber expenses. You know, very easy if you don't have a finished basement. If you have a finished basement, that may not be an option. But we, you know, we always talk to people and tell them all those things that are there. So yes. And then we also asked them questions about, did they have to install a grinder pump? Are they one of the properties that needs to have a grinder pump? In some cases, you know, their house may be set down relative to the road because they're near a pond or a body of water, and they need to pump up to the street because we can't go deep enough to collect everybody by gravity. That's our goal, is to try to connect as many properties in Chatham as we can by gravity. But sometimes, just based on the topography and where the house is, we can't put the sewer in the road deep enough to connect that particular property by gravity. So they have to have a pump. So we asked them if they had a pump. We asked them if they had any unique circumstances. Did they have to go exceedingly deep? So yes, we do ask those questions, and I can make a, you know, I have a spreadsheet that I update regularly as we get those surveys in. You know, I can make that available to the board and even post it online so people can see. You know, it does range all over the place. You know, everybody, very frequently I get asked the question, well, you know, what's the average cost going to be? And honestly, you can't answer that because every property is different. You know, for somebody with a small lot whose house is close to the road and their septic system is right in the front, their connection costs will be relatively low, you know, maybe a couple of $1,000s. For somebody else whose house is 500 feet down a dirt driveway at a low elevation compared to the road, you know, they may end up spending $20,000, $30,000 to do it because they, you know, the distance, the grinder pump. You know, we have people that put in generators as part of this, you know, this work because they have to put in a grinder pump, and they don't want their grinder pump not to be available if the power goes out. So it really ranges all across the board.
So we don't have an abatement program where you could just say, well, I can't do it because of a hardship. There is a hardship program or a loan program with the county. Is there one there? But we don't have one here.
We don't have one here. We've talked about it, but to be honest with you, we've had relatively few people say to us, you know, I absolutely cannot do it. You know, it's more, can I put it off for 2 or 3 years until my kids are out of college, or, you know, we're in the process of selling the property, you know, can we do it, that kind of thing. Yes, there is a low interest loan program through Barnstable County. I will tell you, it's probably not as good a loan program as it was 4, 5, 6 years ago when interest rates at a bank were higher. You know, now interest rates on, you know, home equity loans have dropped. So I urge everyone to talk to their bank and before they go to the county and see what's going on. I'm getting a lot of feedback all of a sudden, Shireen. I don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
The other thing that people need to be aware of, there is also a program on your state income tax where you can get some relief if you make a connection to the sewer on your income tax with the Commonwealth. So that information, both of those information is up on our website, and whenever people call, we also point them in that direction. The other thing that I frequently point out to people is to get together with your neighbors. Like anything that you buy, if you go to an engineer and you say, hey, you know, we've got 5, 6, 10 houses that all want to engineer their connections versus each one doing it individually, you know, there is a savings in aggregating together. And also during construction, if a contractor knows that he's got 5 or 6 houses all in the same street that need, you know, to make a sewer connection, you can generally work a better price. And we've had a couple of neighborhoods that have done that very successfully so far.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, you've had your hand up. I know that you were the one that asked for this report.
Yeah, thanks, Shereen. I did ask for the report, and Bob, that was an excellent summary. The written document was excellent as well, and I think we ought to try to get it on the town's website so folks can access. It's a very good, summary of the history, and also where we are currently with respect to this major investment that we're making in infrastructure in this town. But I think the town's leaders, going back, a couple of decades now, ought to be applauded that they had the vision to start down this road. But I also think it's very important that as select people and as leaders in the town that we revisit where we are with respect to this major project, and that our taxpayers know where we are with respect to it and what our plans are, what we've accomplished, and what our plans are currently and what they are going forward. Because when you talk about 100 million here and 130 million there and another 200 million here, it starts to add up, even if it is over 30 years or so. So if I might summarize, we're about halfway through phase one. We started in 10, we're in 20 or thereabouts, and we're going to 30, and we spent, that phase I think was 130 or 240 in total, and we're going to spend 130 to get it done. And I applaud the effort, and I know it's not science, but it isn't science. I think you got to design it as you go, as you noted. But I have two or three concerns, or two or three questions or comments, and then some concern as well. But is there any way that we as a town can measure results as yet? And I'm talking about nitrogen loading per se. Is there any way we could circle back and get a measurable result and report back to the town that, look, we got this major investment cooking, but this is how we've improved nitrogen loading, or this is where we're still waiting for it to lessen and to improve? It's my first question, I guess. And then my next one was, Shereen raised the issue, but the cost of tying into the system. I've heard it said, quite a few times that folks are finding some of the hookups to be fairly expensive and difficult to handle. So, and I have researched the county's program, and your remarks are spot on. It's not as advantageous now as it was prior when interest rates were higher. But maybe we should try to investigate other alternatives. This isn't for you, Bob, per se, but look at other ways to help folks out to tie into these, because some of these hookups they're 10, 20, 30, 40 grand. If you have grinder pumps and you're 150 yards away from in your downhill, I mean, you're talking big bucks here for some of these hookups. And then I would ask us just to mine the data just a little bit more for, I know the 40 folks that have, the options to go to two different ways in a roadway while they would wait. But I'd really like to know, so we can kind of focus on the reasons for folks not hooking up and getting extensions over and above the kids who are in college. How many are strapped financially to drive kind of the argument home to maybe come up with a different alternative financing mechanism. And I wrote down, just what you said, people ask you what the average cost is. And I wrote down, well, what's the average cost right before you said that. But I understand it's all over the place, but for those that are younger, have young families that are told to hook up and don't have the money, they're scratching their heads a little bit. I know for a fact. So those are my comments. I would like to see the rate at 90%, if you will, and I'll talk to the Board of Health as well in terms of what maybe we can mine their data to see why folks haven't hooked up. But then we're going to go turn around and ask for a $7 million, I think at a $4.5 million for warrant articles. So I think it's just really good for us as a board to revisit what we're asking for and why, and to get everybody plugged in and tied in, if you will. Excuse the metaphor. Anyway, thank you for your time. I think it's very, very important projects. Maybe the number one, other than freshwater, the number one thing that we tackle in this town. Oh, I have one other question. The downtown area, you said we put in the mains downtown and down Route 28 in the 70s or 80s, whatever. What kind of shape are those mains in, those wastewater mains?
The downtown area from the Rotary east over towards about Chatham Bars Ave and, some sections on Cross Street. No, that was the original sewer system that was constructed in 1969, 1971 period. And then there was force mains that ran from the Stage Harbor Pump Station behind the Orpheum Theater all the way down to the wastewater treatment plant under Route 28.
Yeah.
What we did was we came in and we basically put gravity sewer under all of Route 28 so that we could connect all the properties adjacent to it, because we didn't have people connecting into the force main for very good engineering reasons. Overall, the system in the older system in the downtown area is in reasonably good shape. It's been well maintained over the years. We have identified a couple of areas in there that need to be upgraded, and we've talked about the Main Street project, which is involving both stormwater, sidewalks, as well as sewer upgrade.
Yeah.
Because we did find a hole in the sewer system over on Chatham Bars Ave, and we can make things work better down there by doing additional sewer work on Main Street. And just about a month ago, I was notified of a hole in the sewer main over on Old Queen Anne, where it comes up the hill from Pond Street, basically back to the Rotary. So we're working on a design right now to make that repair. You have to understand some of the sewer main, in the 1969-70 is not plastic pipe like it is today. And so it is susceptible over the years to issues. But it's been well maintained. We've done an I&I survey, which is an inflow and infiltration survey. Are there leaks and all in the pipe and water getting in and whatnot? And that identified very few issues in that system. So, it's one of these things, as long as you maintain it over time, it still has life left in it. But we're making upgrades as we go along. And very similar to the upgrade to the Mill Pond Pump Station, there are segments of the old system that we need to upgrade the larger pipe sizes, because we're going to be bringing additional flow into that pipe from other areas as we expand the system out. And so to accommodate that flow, we have to, increase the pipe size. And so we'll be doing some of that, in future years as well. But all that is identified in the comprehensive wastewater management plan and is part of the plan. If I could, for just a second, to address your first query regarding, how do we show that we're getting the bang for the buck, if you will. As you're probably aware, we have had a water quality monitoring program since 1998. Every summer, we have about 150 volunteers that go out throughout the town of Chatham and Pleasant Bay as well. We expanded that in Pleasant Bay with the Pleasant Bay Alliance back in 2000. So that water quality has been collected consistently every year. And that is basically what allows us to see whether or not things are getting worse, getting better, or staying the same, if you will. One of the reasons why we targeted the Oyster Pond watershed a couple of years ago is we had conversations with both DEP and with the Cape Cod Commission. And very similar to what I said, you have to think of sewering as a jigsaw puzzle. And if you kind of bounce all over the puzzle and you do random areas here and there, it will take that much longer to see improvement in any one estuarine system. So after talking with the Cape Cod Commission and DEP, we said, well, let's target the Oyster Pond watershed and try to get that 100% sewered so that we can then monitor that and say, here's an area where we've completely done what we need to do in that watershed, and then we can see the improvements over time. Now, it's not instantaneous because remember, groundwater moves about a foot per day. So, for some of the outlying areas within a watershed, it may take the clean water that, once somebody's connected and is no longer dumping dirty water through their septic system, if you will, and you now have clean water starting to move in, it may take 1,000 days or 2 or 3 years for that clean water to get to the estuary. So, we're just about now to the period where we can start to see some improvement because some of these areas have been sewered and people have connected in large enough numbers. But we're still, probably 5 years away from really being able to clearly document that. And I know that may be frustrating for people, but it's just the nature of the beast. It's not like, we put the sewer in, we connect somebody up, and immediately, the impact reaches the estuary.
Yeah.
There is that lag period. And one of the things we did as part of the comprehensive wastewater management plan with USGS and the School for Marine Science, SMAST at UMass Dartmouth, was we delineated the 10-year time of travel to all these various embayments. So there's a line in the reports, the watershed is further out, but there's that 10-year travel time where anything within that 10-year travel time will get to the estuary within 10 years. But if there's areas beyond that, it may take even longer for that clean groundwater to reach the estuary. So the estuaries will not, instantaneously improve. They will gradually improve over time. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's really what we're looking at. And our intent is to continue that water quality monitoring program, into the future, to be able to document that improvement. I mean, 10 years ago, I had queries from, our water watchers, as we call them. When we finished the plan, they said, "Oh, we don't need to monitor the ground, water anymore, do we?" And I'm like, "No, we do, because that's how we're going to show that we're getting the improvement that we want to get." And we may see improvement faster in some areas. Like when we finish sewering all of Oyster Pond, that improved water quality is going to trickle into Oyster River and Stage Harbor. So we may find that with that improvement and some additional improvements, say in Oyster River watershed and Stage Harbor watershed, that we don't necessarily have to do everything that we said we had to do for Stage Harbor, because that clean water is going to propagate, through the entire system. It may not get into Mill Pond and Little Mill Pond because, it wouldn't necessarily go back up that way. And that's why we also keep an eye on Nantucket Sound, because if water quality starts to go downhill in Nantucket Sound, that gets brought in on the incoming tide into the Stage Harbor complex, into Mill Creek, into Taylor's Pond. So, that's where we look at the bigger estuaries, because what our neighbors are doing in Harwich and other areas on Cape potentially could have an impact on us.
Thank you, Bob. That was an excellent response. I'm just looking for the day when the eelgrass comes back, because it's not getting whacked by nitrogen, and we can have bay scallops again. Maybe I'll be able to go some other time in my lifetime. We'll see. But it's very important that we get rid of the nitrogen so the eelgrass does come back, so we get the kind of shellfishing we used to have here in town.
Right. Those are major goals. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you for your report.
Thanks, Jeff. Dean, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Shireen. And thank you, Bob, for a very, very comprehensive report. I appreciated the historical piece to it, because I wasn't aware of the background for the $18 million grant from the Department of Agriculture. I knew we had the grant. I didn't know how it had transpired, so that was an interesting story. I just really had two questions related to matters that you talked about in your presentation and in response to Jeff's comments, having to do with the connection rate, which is 63%, and if you throw in properties in process, it's 75%, and how we can bump that up faster. I heard you say that, if I'm correct, you're not really finding folks who say we never want to connect or we resist connecting. Is that correct?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. With respect to those that are arguing a financial hardship or temporary financial hardship, and you mentioned the county program, and that there had been some discussion in the past of having a town program. Had anyone ever considered a grant program for the town? And does it make any sense at this point, with interest rates the way they are at the banks, to even think about a town program, whether it's loan or a grant?
We've talked about it in generalities. We've only had 2 properties that I'm aware of that really had financial straits and were, went to the county, and the county basically said, you're not eligible because, of their financial situation. Not that they weren't eligible because of the sewer connection, but just their overall financial situation. They couldn't get a loan from a bank. They couldn't get a loan from the county, and you know, so they really had no alternative. And so we did just, you know, had some preliminary discussions about trying to figure out a way to, you know, set up some kind of a loan program or a grant program that we would bring to you as the water and sewer commissioners for consideration. We had some discussions about that with town council, about, you know, some examples of other communities in the Commonwealth that had done something like that. But it, you know, and then COVID kind of came along and it kind of just fell back on, you know, off to the side again. But we can certainly resurrect that and have that discussion, you know, probably starting with the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee. And then if, you know, we propose something, bring it up to you. You know, it's the kind of thing that would likely go to town meeting for funding. And, you know, probably definitely not this year, probably next year. You know, I will throw a suggestion out there. As you all know, we got $2.65 million from Harwich as part of their connection to us. It's always been my position that that should be spent on wastewater in some form. I know you guys have the ultimate authority and are considering potential other uses for it. But taking some of that and creating some kind of a grant or loan program, you know, might not be a bad idea. So I'm just kind of throwing that idea out there.
I do remember that the idea of this was featured in the Chatham 365 recommendations, and I expressed some concern about subsidies at the time when that report was made. But I think we should try to be imaginative, even more so than we have been, and we've been very imaginative in this whole program, as is very clear from the report from the beginning, to try to get these numbers up a little bit. The final comment I'll make is, as someone who connected about 15 plus years ago to the downtown original sewer system, it was reassuring to hear that that system is in reasonably good shape. But I can imagine, I would assume those pipes are water pipes, are iron pipes, or are they cement or concrete, or what, do we know what they are? I mean,
a lot of those at the time were what we call AC pipe or asbestos cement pipe. Yeah. Because it was not used for drinking water purposes. You know, now that is problematic, obviously, not so much from the sewage flowing through it, but whenever we have to work on them, or we have to remove them because they failed. Obviously, we have to follow asbestos criteria, and it makes it more expensive. And also, you know, one of the other options that's out there now is lining the pipes. You know, there are new liners that can be put inside existing pipes. That is an option, but as I mentioned, some of these pipes, we have capacity issues. And if we want to add additional flow to them, we basically need to upsize the pipes. So, but that's, you know, we look at all those options whenever we talk about, you know, the old system.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Shireen.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Dr. Bob before we go to the warrant articles? Okay, all right, Bob, do you want to speak to the two warrant articles?
Yeah, so we have two warrant articles proposed for this year. The first one is a wastewater related article for $7 million. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we in the CWMP, we targeted somewhere between 15 and 20 every 2 years. We haven't quite held to that schedule, just the way things have kind of fallen out. You know, we severely front loaded the first year to take advantage of the federal stimulus and the USDA. But this money would pay for an upgrade to the Queen Anne Road pump station. That is one of the original pump stations. It's the one that you probably pass every day when you go to Village Market or CVS. It's the little green kind of shed over in the corner of that parking lot. You know, it's old technology. It's hard to get parts and whatnot, but we do need to upgrade that because we are going to be bringing more flow through that pump station as we expand the system out further. You know, and it would basically be a total soup to nuts upgrade, new electrical system, emergency generator, upgrade the SCADA system and whatnot. We did submit that pump station upgrade to the SRF program for funding in the 2021 intended use plan. And so it would be at 2%, and we would also make the application for 0%. And I'm happy to report that late Friday afternoon, after the memo was already in your packet, we received word that it is listed on the SRF intended use plan for 2021. So, that way we would definitely be guaranteed the low interest 2% or the 0. And then also in this article, we have funding to upgrade the radios at our water and sewer pump stations. The current manufacturer of the radio that we've been using in all our pump stations for decades now has basically discontinued them. So we're going to be upgrading the radios in the pump stations that are currently under construction to a new version, but we will need to go back and do the same thing at all the existing wastewater pump stations as well as our water wells because they're all tied in through the same system. And then we've also got funding in here. If you remember, about a month and a half ago, we were before the board, excuse me, and talked about potentially adding pump stations into residential neighborhoods that were originally designed as low pressure, but the neighbors voluntarily, offered up pump station sites because there's no public land, if you will, in either location. And so we've asked our engineers to go back and take a look at the feasibility of adding pump stations to those 2 locations. So not to lose any time, we included funding in this article that if the decision were made to go ahead and add pump stations at either or both of those sites, we would have the funding available. And so that is what the entire article includes.
Okay. Dean has a question. His hand is up. Dean?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bob, just a question. I raised my hand because I wanted to offer motion or motions. With respect to that last point, who will make that decision? Will it be the staff? Will it come back to the board to put those neighborhood pump stations in under this article if this money is authorized?
We indicated we would bring that back to the board as water and sewer commissioners when we had the discussion back in November. Yes. Okay.
So I'm prepared to offer a motion. It looks to me like there are 2 items, two sections to this. There's a ballot question and there's a capital article. Is that correct?
Correct.
So,
yes.
I think I'll offer a motion first to, if we're ready, Jill, you tell me. It looks as though this is ready for consideration to place on the warrant. Is that correct, Jill? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Madam Chair, I move that we place the capital item for this the capital article for this wastewater project expansion and borrowing on the warrant for the annual town meeting for 2021.
Do you have a second on that?
Second, Peter.
Peter, second. Okay. Any further discussion? Take a roll. Dean?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. All right, that motion is passed 5-0-0.
Madam Chair, I move that we recommend approval of this article to the town meeting for annual 2021.
Second?
Second.
Second, Peter. Any further discussion? Okay, let's move this forward. Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Okay, it's voted to recommend.
Madam Chair, I move that we place the ballot question that has been presented for this particular wastewater expansion debt exclusion on the annual town meeting annual town election ballot for 2021.
Great. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Second.
Okay, Peter, second again. Okay, let's
Get the next one.
Okay, you get the next one. All right, there'll be plenty more. Peter, why don't you take the first vote then? Peter?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Okay, this placed on the ballot, 500. Okay. All right. Let me just see. Okay, so the next capital item is the storm. Oh, hold on. What do we got next?
Yeah.
You're right. It's a
Yep.
storm.
Stormwater.
Yep. Stormwater. Okay, go ahead.
So this one is something new for us. There was a change at the state level last year. Previously, the SRF program had really been only targeted to wastewater projects. Last year, the state changed it to include stormwater projects. And we had a number of stormwater projects in the works. And so we basically bundled all those together and submitted an SRF application last August, the same time we did the wastewater one. And again, I'm happy to let you know, we just learned Friday that this has also been approved for funding on the SRF program, which would be at 2%. There is no 0%, if you will, for stormwater projects. This project basically includes 3 components. The first would be phase 2 of the Kroll Road project. We're currently working on phase 1 of that project right now. That's the phase 1E contract that I described earlier with wastewater. We bundled the wastewater and stormwater of that together just because the area that we were working with is so flat that we really needed to make sure that both infrastructures were going to work, and the size of the stormwater infrastructure made that absolutely critical. So this is the second phase of the stormwater improvements, which would extend those improvements further up Kroll Road, would also put additional improvements in at the DPW facility, because right now all the DPW facility stormwater runoff runs through pipes out into Kroll Road and ultimately ends up in Frostfish Creek. DPW facilities are considered by the state a high pollutant load facility just because of the nature of the activity that goes on there. And so we wanted to put appropriate facilities in place on the DPW site to mitigate as much of that as we could to prevent it from getting into Frostfish Creek. The second component of this is the Main Street town offices. We've talked before about the Main Street project. As I mentioned earlier, it includes sewer upgrades, it includes new sidewalks, ADA compliance, and all those kinds of things, as well as addressing stormwater issues, which ultimately are all piped down into oyster ponds. And we did a big study back in 1990 where we looked at all the pipe systems that end up discharging into oyster pond. And over the intervening years, we've basically addressed a number of those. You know, we did work years ago at the community center drainage and put in drainage under the parking lot and all to take care of that. We've done oyster pond furlong. That's where we have the EPA grant funded project to look at nutrients or address nutrients there as well. We've done a lot of stormwater work on Cross Street. We've done a lot of stormwater work on Stage Harbor Road, right in front of Oyster Pond. And so the Main Street downtown area and the Main Street, the public parking lots at the town offices were kind of the last big piece of that puzzle. So we've bundled this with the sewer project and with all the other projects going together. And then the third component of this article is runoff from the municipal fish pier. Right now, runoff from Shore Road as well as the upper and lower parking lots at the fish pier discharge directly into Chatham Harbor without any substantial treatment. As you know, we've recently upgraded the fuel tanks in the upper parking lot of the fish pier. That area was temporarily paved when we did that work. I had conversations with the DPW director, and we said, well, let's see if we can address the stormwater, because the only area that we really have to address stormwater coming off Shore Road in that particular area is under that parking lot as well. So rather than repave the whole parking lot and then talk about tearing it up a couple of years later to put drainage in, we decided to hold off on doing the final paving to see if we could go ahead and address the drainage. So we worked with our engineers, came up with a design to address drainage on Shore Road, as well as the parking lots, and that's also included in this article. Now, I had a conversation this afternoon with the DPW director, and I'm going to offer a proposal, if you will, for a change to the article and a change to the area that's covered. One of the items that you discussed last week or last Saturday during your capital budget review was the Eldridge Garage property and the fact that we have a drainage issue on Main Street. And so rather than treating that separately, our recommendation tonight is that we increase this article by $300,000 to fund the needed improvements along Main Street where the flooding currently occurs at the Eldridge Garage property. That is a higher number than I suggested it might be during Saturday's discussion, because after talking with the DPW director, it's a much longer stretch of roadway than we originally thought. And so to make sure that we have sufficient money, we don't think it's going to be 300,000, but to make sure that we had sufficient money, given that we really haven't done any engineering, it's in the works, but it's not completed yet, and that there's a longer run of street involved. We came up with that number as a rough placeholder. One of the things that I would suggest, if we do go in that direction, is that we would then have discussions with DEP about amending our SRF application to include that additional funding within the currently approved SRF application, if you will. And so I would be optimistic, given past discussions with DEP, about amending these kind of project scopes, if you will, that we would be able to get SRF funding for that additional component as well. So we'd be able to borrow that money at 2% rather than the current rate of around 3 to 3.5. So I offer that as a potential change to this article for the board's consideration.
Okay. Jean, your hand's up. Jean, and then Peter, and then Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I'll let Peter offer the motions, but Bob, touching on the Eldridge Garage, will the additional 300,000, in addition to dealing with issues on the street, address the drainage on the Eldridge Garage property itself? Because that was something we had talked about on Saturday. Does that extend to that?
We could certainly look at that. There is some existing drainage on the Eldridge Garage property. But yes, I think we definitely could consider looking at it, look at the engineering of it, to see if that amount of money would be sufficient.
Yeah, because what we talked about on Saturday was doing the drainage for the Eldridge Garage as an initial step in the longer term plan of that project, however it might shape out.
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say, Dean, the Saturday discussion relative to Eldridge Garage was, we really were separating out the Main Street drainage problem as separate from the overall Eldridge Garage site improvements, because if I recall correctly, the board's proposal was to put off the larger site discussion for later. And our suggestion was, let's separate out the Main Street flooding issue and get that addressed as quickly as possible. Because as Tom said, they're pumping out about 10,000 gallons of water off Main Street every time, we have a substantial event. And if we were to get an event and then it freezes, that creates a major issue for both vehicle traffic and pedestrian street using that area of Main Street.
I guess I had understood on Saturday that the Eldridge Garage property and what takes place on the Main Street were intricately connected. So I guess that's why I asked the question whether this was going to cover anything on the Eldridge property, and would that disqualify it from the SRF loan consideration also? I don't know if you have any comment on that.
It may disqualify it. It wouldn't disqualify necessarily the whole amount We frequently have SRF projects, and some things are eligible and some things are ineligible. So the state may say, well, on the garage property itself, it's ineligible, but the portion related to the street would be eligible. So, we may not be able to cover the entire amount through SRF if that's the way it shakes out.
Is the flooding on the street the matter that the neighbors across the street have been concerned about and have registered their concerns with the town over the past couple of years? Is that what they're talking about? Will this
Yes.
address the problem?
Yes, this idea was designed to address that issue. Yes.
Okay, and the last question is back on the Crowell Road. Will this address the problems that are associated in the area adjacent to the dentist office and the next door neighbor who had obviously similar concerns about flooding?
Yes, the phase 2 is designed to address that. Yes.
Okay.
Most of it is
you.
being addressed in phase 1, but this phase 2 that's requested here would help that situation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Peter?
Well, Dean asked the question I wanted, but I do have just to remind me, you put a placeholder in that's going to go to town meeting and a vote for a certain amount of money. And then let's say we spend less. How does that work afterwards?
Anything that's not spent in that article would go back, would be turned back.
Turn back to the general fund? No, turn back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Alex has her hand up. She can
Yeah.
Yeah, Alex.
specifically.
Thank you. If we don't borrow the money, then we would rescind the borrowing authorization, or we could repurpose the borrowing authorization for a similar project.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Shereen. Bob, I have a question for you and Tom on the improvements to the fish pier parking lots. What do we put in to catch the stormwater that currently runs into Chatham Harbor? What do we do with it? We put in a huge leaching field? Is it going to be near the gas tanks we just put in there? Well, it doesn't ultimately end up in Chatham Harbor anyway. So is there enough space to do all this stuff there?
Yeah, good question, Jeff. What we always try to do is we would try to do as much as we can before we get to the parking lot per se. So we would install some drainage along Shore Road, catch basins and leaching pits. And then to handle whatever remains and from the parking lot itself, we would put leaching under the parking lot. Whether we probably wouldn't put pits in, we would put chambers which are shallower. And that gives us more distance to groundwater because, the bottom line is sand and the soils on the Cape are great filters, and they do a great job of filtering out contaminants. So, the more distance we can give between where we discharge that water, and by that I mean, from a catch basin into the leaching pit, the greater distance we can have to ground where the groundwater is, which would then flow into Chatham Harbor, the better off we are. The rule of thumb is I always try to get at least 2 feet. A foot is the absolute minimum. In some areas of town, we get 20 or 30 feet, which is great.
Yeah.
So that's what we would do. So we would try to break off and do some stuff along Shore Road to minimize the amount that we would have to put under the parking lot. But, that upper parking lot's pretty big. And even if we, have to take off the table, the area where the tanks are, there's still a fair amount of space there to put leaching in.
Were those tanks fiberglass?
Yes, those were all brand new state-of-the-art fiberglass tanks, so there's no concern about them.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And if you want to include the 300K for Eldridge, I'd like to see the language before we vote this. I prefer seeing the language, you guys. That's all.
Yeah.
Before
Okay.
we vote.
I see Tom's got his hand up. Tom, did you want to add something? Tom? Director of DPW, Tom Temple? Okay. All right, Corey, why don't you go ahead and maybe
There
Tom
it
will.
is. I'm sorry, it was
Oh.
not unmuting for me. Good evening, everybody. I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to add, I probably, chances are down at the fish pier, we would probably try to put some type of MDC trap in between. So when it's leaving from the catch basins to that, it gives us the ability to clean that out prior to it going to that filtration system that Dr. Bob was talking about. It makes it a lot easier to keep everything clean and manageable instead of going into those chambers for that excess water where we be held before it's leaching back into the ground. So to answer that question, with respect to Main Street, the reason that the price has increased is because when we had them do the pre and post development for Main Street at 635 Main Street, that incorporated 1,180 feet approximately in both peak directions for coming back to the low point. When you look at that area and the average pavement width in that area was approximately 27 feet, that impervious material that would be handled in a 25-year storm event minimum, which is the town standard, between your public bidding, your surveying and plans and specification, and the actual installation, as Bob indicated, we'd be looking to set some new basins out in the roadway, larger pipes, and then connecting. And we would try to make sure that we worked hand in hand with Katie Donovan to make sure the proposals that they had, we can set this drainage system in a place that we don't have to revisit it at a later time. So that's the intent, in making sure that the stubs that we would need coming into the property, if we were to someday put facilities in there, whether it's restrooms or whatever, that's not going to be in the way either. So we'd make sure that we, dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's to make sure that we had it in a place that wasn't going to affect future development if that's the board's direction later on.
Great, thanks, Tom.
Thank you all.
Corey, you have some questions or comments?
I just gonna kind of follow up with the addition of the $300,000 for the drainage issues in front of the Eldridge Garage. I'm frankly very supportive of this. I mean, we're already pumping out a considerable amount of water on that site, so we have a maintenance issue. Which that in itself is not going to be inexpensive over time. So this is something that needs to be addressed, and if this is the best mechanism, I'm supportive of it. To Jeff's point, I'm comfortable waiting to get the actual language in black and white before we take a formal vote on it. But in spirit, I think this is something we really should do. So,
okay. Thanks, Corey. Everybody in agreement that we should wait on the language and update on the funding? I think will be prudent to do. Okay. All right. Thank you, Bob.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, our next and final, this is fiscal year 2022 operating and capital budget review, and we'll be doing this on the DPW divisions, including water. So Alex, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In your packet tonight, I don't really have a presentation for you tonight, but we were going to start focusing on the different departments. So tonight we're looking at DPW, as you mentioned, the operating and water operating budgets, as well as some of the capital. So again, looking at the Department of Public Works, the divisions within that we want to look at tonight are the highway, sewer, transfer station, parks and grounds, and water. Several of the smaller divisions of DPW are snow and ice, lighthouse beach, the fuel depot, and street lighting. And then those are the small ones. We don't really focus on those tonight, but we can go over them if you have questions. Also under DPW are the principal projects, operations, administration, and facilities, recreation and beaches, and lighthouse beach that will be discussed at a later date. Okay. So the DPW operating budget is showing an increase of about 6.57% over FY 2021. That equates to about $394,000. And a lot of that is attributed to the movement of the GIS planner, who we've removed from the community development department and put into the DPW department, which makes for better synergy within the department. There are some contractual obligations with our contracted services for water and sewer, and as well as increased cost of operations, specifically under the transfer station.
Right.
Again, the salaries are level funded except for contractual increases, steps, and longevity. no COLA was built into any FY 2022 salaries under the DPW. I highlighted in the memo that the transfer station division is showing an increase of $125,250. Again, mostly for increased costs for tipping fees and the removal of recyclable materials. And the sewer division increased costs for electricity, plant maintenance, and sludge disposal, and also the contracted services provided by Weston Sampson. And then new this year, the Parks and Grounds division was segregated from the Parks and Rec, which is now Recreation and Beaches, in FY 2021. So just pointing that out, although there's no change in the amount appropriated from FY 2021 to FY 2022, except for those contractual step increases and longevity. So I'll stop here and pause if you have any questions. I know Tom Temple is attending the meeting, so we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Wonderful, thank you. Questions for Alex? Jeff?
Yeah, they're for Alex and for Tom. I just wanted to highlight the plant maintenance and the contract services under the sewer department. The contract services, that's Sampson and Weston, you guys. That's the amount, Alex, for 37K increase in their contract.
Yeah, that is correct. We just had signed a new contract a couple of years ago. I believe the FY 2021 or FY 20 was the first year. We have small increases built in for their services.
Yeah, and the other highlight is in the transfer station, just in the tipping charges gone up quite a bit, 68K, and the recyclable materials being removed up 57K. Just if Tom could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, that's also contract from Vanta, who we are under contract with for our tipping fees, and that's a multi-year contract as well from CMAS that's handling that end of it, as well as our contract unit prices for the recycling, which is handled over in Westboro at that facility.
The only other question I had, Alex, if I might, Shireen, just for 1 second, is on
Sure.
in the sewer under revenues. So we're tracking in our sewer rate revenue, we're tracking like halfway through the year at 321. And that, if you annualize that, it comes out to like 642, but we've only budgeted 400K. So I just wondered why we're just being conservative on how we project revenue.
Yeah, we'll look at that as we go through. Again, the town doesn't vote revenue, but those are part of our local receipts. And as I've stated to the Finance Committee earlier today, we track those revenues to see where we are. We usually try to take an average of the prior 3 years so we don't get increased too much, because we'll be questioned by the Department of Revenue.
Okay, they are tracking. I mean, just notice through the first 6 months, they are tracking well in excess of 400K. That's all. I'm sure you've seen it too, Alex. So I'm not sure you're not surprised by it. Those are the questions I had, guys. I mean, I have more, but I'll hold off.
All right, Peter?
Thank you. This was for Tom again. Yeah, back to Jeff's comment on tipping fees and CMAS. Well, it's not less than a year ago. There was a lot of concern, and we had a lot of discussion with the board, with you, and what the cost would be and so forth. Are you comfortable now with where we are? We got a contract. This is going to be it, you think, for the next year or so, without a lot of changes, or are we still in a position where it's going to start going up some more?
Well, the beauty of this contract, at least, we have a set tipping fee, and we didn't jump ship, and we didn't go to another vendor, which a couple of the other communities.
I'm afraid Tom is frozen.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess the gist of it is he said that we're contracted and that we didn't move to another company, which obviously we probably would have.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion about that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Alex on? Okay. Thanks, Peter. Any other questions for Alex on this presentation tonight? Nothing else?
Madam Chair, I know we also highlighted the water operating budget in the memo. Again, funded through water rates. We're not looking to increase water rates anytime soon, as they were increased a couple of years ago. So again, the water operating budget is at $3.6 million. increase of 268,000, again, mostly for the contracted services, as well as